And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, we're here each week meeting interesting people and discussing topical issues, and today it's politics.
Fasten your seatbelt. We've got Mike McCarville and Ben Odom coming on to talk about all the political races, both local and national, and we think it's going to be exciting. I think we'll just kind of bring them in here and say, okay guys, go, and you and I'll step back and try to stay out of the way.
We'll take a look at some of the key local races that take place around the state, and of course the statewide races, and we might be able to draw an opinion from them on the presidential election.
If we try hard.
Yeah, it should be a lively show, and we hope you'll stay with us. This is The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Every day America uses clean-burning natural gas instead of coal or oil is a day of victory for our environment. That's why Chesapeake chose to explore for natural gas exclusively, and we've never looked back. Because natural gas burns twice as clean as oil or coal, and reducing carbon emissions to combat potential global warming is every bit as urgent as cutting our dependence on energy imports. As America's #1 driller of new gas wells, Chesapeake is moving fast to find untapped reserves of natural gas here at home. It's the right fuel for America's economy and the fuel for a clean air future. We just happen to be early to see it so clearly. Chesapeake, natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Can't remember a time when we've had 4 microphones and 4 people more likely to talk. So we'll get straight to it. Kent's going to introduce today's
guest.
This
is my first and last turn now. We are very pleased today to have 2 guests with us. I'm going to introduce to my left Ben Odom. Ben is a veteran Democratic Party leader. He practices law in Norman with the law firm of Odom, Sparks, and Jones. He has been the Democratic nominee for Congress, and he's been the vice chair of the Democratic Party in the state of Oklahoma. He has been legal counsel for the Clinton-Gore campaign in Oklahoma 2 times, I think. And Ben, this is your first time on The Verdict. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
And from the first visit to the most frequent visitor, Mike McCarville has set another record, now appearing on his 12th appearance on The Verdict.
Man.
12th. Former talk show host with KTOK and news director as well. If you want to find out more about Mike, look for the McCarville Report online. And he's going to be talking a little bit today, of course, very objectively, as he always is, but from perhaps the Republican perspective. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here with Ben.
2006 seemed to be a year the Democrats did a little bit better than they had been doing. Mike, what's going to happen in 2008? Is that trend toward the left, or is it going to swing back to the right? I'll give you both a chance. Mike,
well, are we talking state races or nationally? State races? I think, well, for example, let's examine the state Senate races, which that's where all the attention's going to be. I think Ben would agree. I think Republicans have a decent shot at taking control, depending on how a couple of races that we'll get into here later go. It's not a bed of roses, obviously, and there have been some bumps along the road for the Republicans. They got some challenges to overcome, but I think that at least the Republican leadership in the Senate feels pretty confident that they're going to be able to take control.
So the R's remain in control of the House and break that tie in the state Senate and move it to the R category.
Barely, I might add.
Okay. Ben, what's your take?
The triangle is going to be real important here, and the triangle runs from Nancy Riley's seat in Tulsa over to Stillwater, to Mike Morgan's term-limited seat, and down to Lawton, where there's a chance for a Democratic pickup for a seat. put into play another couple of other seats that might be in there in West Norman and maybe even out in the Panhandle area there. And that's going to determine who controls the state Senate in all likelihood. But the state has been trending more Democratic. Now, last time out was not a non-presidential cycle. Typically in Oklahoma, very helpful to Democrats to be in the non-presidential cycle. But this time out, as Mike and I were just discussing before we started taping, the models are kind of off the table here. Barack Obama is firing up young people who have not typically voted in heavy numbers. It looks like they are going to vote in heavier numbers this time, and there'll be an increased turnout in certain other communities as well. You put those two things together, coupled with a lack of enthusiasm on the McCain level and the high negatives that Jim Inhofe brings in the Senate race, and this is a very tough election to model and go work through the usual computer projection and say, oh gosh, it's going to work out this way. That's kind of going to be like politics 101 here.
Ben, you're not suggesting that Barack Obama is going to carry Oklahoma, are you?
Tough for him to carry Oklahoma unless they target it as a state, but you know, the bottom line is that I think that a lot of people, and even in Oklahoma, think the nation's on the wrong track. And that number helps Barack Obama, and I think that number, we'll see how it plays out, because a lot of people in Oklahoma think Oklahoma's on the right track, but the nation's on the wrong track. And so that plays to, I think, the Democratic legislative candidate's strengths running in those key districts, yet at the same time can help perhaps in the Senate race with Andrew Rice.
Do you see any trickle down from the top of the ticket? I mean, let's assume that many of us, at least on my side of the aisle, assume that Barack Obama is not going to do especially well in Oklahoma. Do you see any trickle down to legislative races, for example?
Not like in the old days. I think that there's still some effect from the top of the ticket, but I think people are increasingly seeing the same media, hearing the same news with the internet and other sources of information. They're making kind of their own decisions. So it used to be that you could say, well, you'd have tremendous top-down drag or something like that. I don't think that's really true anymore, but I do think that a candidate has to look at a realistic level of how much you can overcome. If the top of your ticket's getting beat by 20 or 30 points, it's real tough for you to pull something off down ballot. But if it's anywhere near competitive at the top, then I think anything's game.
Let me ask a question. You mentioned about Jim Inhofe's negative effect. Is there any race at all between Inhofe and Rice?
A surprising race at this point. Andrew Rice has had a lot of success with fundraising, I think more than a lot of people might have guessed that he would have. If that becomes a targeted DSCC race, I think you can see a lot more resources put into here. Inhofe's negative isn't just a high one with Oklahomans. I mean, he wins his elections, but he doesn't win them by ever-increasing gigantic landslides. And he's been fortunate in his opponents in a couple of instances. But the bottom line is that Andrew's position to start with the base of 43% that don't really want to vote for Jim Inhofe, and then if he can persuade and parlay the rest, then he could possibly get there.
Andrew Rice gets maybe 43%.
Okay, but as a theory, if he runs to go through the process of running against Jim Inhofe, which is a big task, then he could turn around 2 years later and go after Coburn's seat. Could he not?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Has that been done before?
He could.
I mean, have we seen people run for a Senate seat knowing there was another one 2 years later, and that might help them propel toward another opportunity?
Well, I think you could argue back in the day that Fred Harris was maybe kind of planning on that
absolutely
for down the road.
In
and he ended up
62 or 64?
64, and he ended up actually winning it. So the bottom line is that sometimes people do that. I mean, I know I ran one race for Congress myself thinking that was kind of the warm-up for when it'd be an open seat. So that may well be the case. And but Inhofe is different from about everybody else in Oklahoma politics in that he has a solid negative with him every time he runs.
That's true.
And he's a polarizing figure, probably the most polarizing figure in Oklahoma politics.
Well, I sure agree with that, Ben. And I tell you, you know, Jim Inhofe, and first a disclaimer, I've been involved in a lot of Inhofe campaigns over the years, managed some, consulted in others, not in recent years. However, Jim Inhofe always has this negative baggage that he carries around with him. It's remarkable when he gets above 53% in approval rating. And this has been a knock on him in every election he's been involved in. 1994, when he and Dave McCurdy went heads up for the Senate, that was the knock on Inhofe. Well, he's polling 52, 53% approval rating. People don't like him. He buried Dave McCurdy. And he's done that historically. And this is a guy who seems to draw more votes that you wouldn't think he would draw if you just look at the polling numbers.
But if you look at Oklahoma statewide, it seemed like we shifted to the left in 06. in '08 that would seem to work against Inhofe and the other statewide candidates. What's the trend going to be here this fall? Is it more of the same what we saw of '06, or we revert back to where we had been previously?
Mayor, I don't even know if I'd call it shifting to the left. It's just kind of back to the center. I mean, I think that...
well, that's same thing.
I mean, I think that it's not quite the same thing in the sense that I don't think it was an embracing of a real national liberal agenda in Oklahoma, but I do think it was a return to centrist politics and kind of a turn away from the hard right politics that had been dominating the state for about 10 years on the federal level especially. And so I think that that trend of looking for centrist candidates who are trying to offer some common sense solutions are really going to play out in the legislative races. And I think if we went through some of these primaries that are out there too, I think we're seeing that dynamic at work inside the Republican Party as well. And that's a real sea change.
Are you considering Rice a centrist?
I consider Rice a very progressive Democrat, but I think that the other thing there is that compared to Jim Inhofe, yes, he's very much a centrist because Jim Inhofe is one of the most reliable 5 or 6 conservative Republican votes in the entire United States Senate.
Concur. One word response to that one.
We kind of skipped the state house, and it's been safely held by the Republican Party.
Yes.
Any reason to think that there would be a shift there, or do you think the Democrats can tighten it up?
I don't see numerically how the Democrats could regain control. Ben may have a contrarian view, but the numbers to me work in favor of the Republicans, just as in a much lesser way they do in terms of taking control of the state Senate.
I think that it's tough for the Democrats to switch enough seats to flip the House, but I do think they're well positioned due to candidate recruitment and some key races to pick up some seats, plus some Republican retirements that were somewhat unexpected, people quitting before their term limits even kicked in. Yeah. And then some quality candidates like Kelly Kerr running for the State House in the Tulsa area. That could be a Democratic pickup seat. The Muskogee seat's been heavily targeted. Kind of surprised, I think, that the Democrats didn't win it last time. So I can see the ground being laid there for the Democrats to pick up some seats. Whether they get to the magic number or not.
Ben, let's talk for just a moment about what I think is the #1 race for the state Senate that could well determine, how whether the Republicans take control, and that's former Republican turned Democrat Nancy Riley, state senator up in Tulsa in Senate District 37. The Republicans are Dan Newberry and Jan McGee. Of course, that won't be decided until the primary. How do you think Riley's going to run? I mean, the registration is 61% Republican in the district? It would seem to me she's really got a hill to climb.
Well, but here's the key point is I don't know it's how well she runs, but it's how well she's been walking her district, door to door, pounding on hundreds of doors with a targeted number of doors to hit each and every day, each and every week. Old-fashioned shoe leather politics there. And in a state Senate race in an urban area, that can still win it for you. And so it's hard to demonize somebody if the voters have met them in person. And I think that Nancy Riley is going to be insulating herself from these attacks that are surely coming her way by the fact she's going out there and doing it the old-fashioned way, one-on-one contact with all those voters.
Parties have got to find candidates, and you talk about, we basically made reference to recruiting candidates. I don't know that the average person knows that takes place. Which party is doing a better job of recruiting candidates or putting more emphasis in it in the last few years?
Well, I mean, this year, this election cycle, Republicans obviously put a lot of effort into recruiting candidates, particularly in the 6 or 7 6 key races for the state Senate. Former OSU President James Halligan, candidate up in the Stillwater area for the seat that Mike Morgan has held. And Republicans are very optimistic about that. The Democrat is Bob Murphy, who resigned as a district judge to make the race. So the Republicans, I think, have done a very good job in that area. In some other areas, I would fault them a little bit. I'm sure Ben is going to say that, well, Democrats, and they have, I think, done a pretty fair job of finding pretty qualified candidates.
Ben?
Well,
beat the Bushes.
Well, it's tough to do. I can just tell you from my time at the party, it's tough to do because you have to find people that are willing to go through the process, and it's not always real fun. It's not so much about shaking hands, kissing babies, and explaining your position on coastal fishery development as it is having to raise money, call everybody you've ever met and ask them for money, or if they love you, send a check. If they don't like the other guy, send a check. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of it's come down to today because money buys the television, buys the radio, buys the direct mail that the candidates get their message out with. So you have to find someone who's willing to put themselves through the process. Secondly, you look for somebody who's got an interesting appeal or fits a district well, one of the two. Have they got an interesting life story that you can tell in 30 seconds to a minute? And so I think when you look at, say, for instance, in the U.S. Senate race, back again to Andrew Rice, the fact that he got into politics from his older brother being killed on 9/11, that's a compelling and commanding story for voters, and they're going to get that right away. Well, same thing's true when you look for everything from city council on up. Is there something about that person that they think they know?
We better get to a break.
We'll be back.
Break time. We've just gotten started.
For you guys.
One more segment. Come on.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Okay.
All right, we're talking politics with Ben Odom and Mike McCarville, and let's talk about the Corporation Commissioner first. Jim Roth took over the seat held by Denise Bodie, so he's now the incumbent. There are 2 Corporation Commission seats, though, available, and the one we're going to talk about first, Jim Roth, the incumbent, and Dana Murphy and Rob Johnson on the R side are her challenge.
This is for the balance of the 2-year term.
That's right.
Partial.
What's your thoughts on that?
Jim Roth, the Democrat, I think is a formidable candidate. He proved that in Oklahoma County, running for county commissioner. I think statewide he's going to have a tough fight. I think it'll be close. I think on the Republican side, Dana Murphy and Rob Johnson are the candidates. Right now, I would give the leg up to Dana Murphy, but I wouldn't bet him money on it. It's going to be a hard-fought battle. Ben?
I agree that Jim Roth is a formidable candidate, and I think that he's going to be able to campaign as an incumbent with a lot of support that you typically see incumbents receive. And I think he's going to have a message, and he's a good campaigner. He did a great job in Oklahoma County as a county commissioner. I think that's translating well to the statewide stage. I think he wins this seat. I do think we have a real battle royal going on between Dana Murphy and Rob Johnson. And my Republican friends tell me they think Dana Murphy is in the driver's seat on that one, so we'll have to see. But a State Representative Rob Johnson's not going to go quietly into the night on that one either.
No way. Yeah.
Any reason to think Jeff Cloud won't do well as an incumbent in the other seat?
I'd have to say he's favored for some of the same reasons that Jim Roth is favored as an incumbent.
Too, yeah.
It's just tough to beat an incumbent unless an incumbent has done something wrong or scandalous or is such an incredibly polarizing figure. They're tough to defeat. And that's true of anything from county commissioner on up to U.S. Senator President. And so I think that same dynamic's going to hold for that one.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's talk about the presidential race, Mike.
Presidential race. Got your seatbelts on? In my humble opinion, if the presidential election was being held right now today, Barack Obama probably will be elected president. The Electoral College math clearly is working in his favor. As Ben has already noted, Barack Obama has a certain amount, a large amount, some would argue, of enthusiasm. He is going to bring to the polls in November a large number, in my opinion, of folks who have never voted before, most of them younger, enthusiastic. On the Republican side, John McCain does not have that kind of enthusiasm working for him. And there are a lot of Republicans who can't stomach Obama who are going to vote for McCain, but they're going to do it holding their noses. And that's kind of a rarity on the Republican side in a presidential race.
Well, what do you see about this talk we've been hearing in the last week or 2 weeks about Obama moving to the center?
Oh, he has been, clearly. I mean, even moving to the right in some ways, and I think Ben would agree. It's smart politics. He's got the nominee. He doesn't have to go left of Hillary Clinton to attract anybody. So now he's got to tack to the center or to the right. And he's going to try to outflank John McCain. And from what I've seen thus far, he's, with the help of the media, mainstream media, I might add, been able to do it fairly successfully, Ben.
If John McCain keeps campaigning like somebody once said, like Paul Kettle on Valium, I mean, he's going to have to step it up a notch. Otherwise, he's going to get into a TV debate with Barack Obama and lose. And it's what the TV debates do is help to, again, take the demonizing factor out of politics. And when people see the candidates talking about specific policy solutions to problems on television in these nationwide debates watched by tens of millions of people, then Obama's positions on some things like, yes, he wants to increase the size of the ground forces by 65,000 for the Army and 27,000 for the Marines, for instance, that's going to befuddle a lot of people who assume he's some sort of doctrinaire liberal that they've tried to put him into a box, and it's just not going to work. Obama's not going to let that happen. And if this trend does continue, when you look at the Electoral College map, McCain's running out of places where he can go play for a win. The same dilemma that Bob Dole ran into in 1996 against Bill Clinton. At some point, you got to win some big states to get the electoral votes, and they just weren't there.
But Ben, being specific is not Obama's strength. I mean, he is very generic, very good at telling people what's popular. And because he talks about ideas, he doesn't talk about solutions, and he's not talking about specifics.
But Ronald Reagan did the same thing, and look how well it worked for him. And the answer is that
it might work,
Obama
but to say he's a guy of specifics is just that's disingenuous.
No, I don't think it is at all, because this is a guy who, from his background at Harvard Law, I think can handle specifics very well, Mayor. And I think that the issue is when he gets pressed with, and if he's memorized his briefing book as well as I'm trying to memorize it, he's got several point plans for everything that comes up if he gets asked a specific policy question. But then that is his strength in this campaign, is to be like Kennedy or Reagan and talk about the grand vision for America and a new day in American politics. And voters are going to respond to the vision and the appeal and the call to service. At the same time, they're going to hear some specifics. They're going to help back it up. Good leaders know how to do that. I think he's a good leader.
Let me ask. Go ahead.
I'm just going to make a quick point about the technicians involved in both of these campaigns. I mean, keep in mind, Barack Obama and his campaign defeated, humiliated, if you will, one of the all-time great Democrat machines ever to come down the pike in the Clinton machine. And you got to give him a lot for that. On the Republican side, my technician friends are very concerned, even though John McCain, the comeback kid, as he's known, did come back surprisingly to be the nominee. His campaign has been flawed in a lot of different ways. Just the technical aspects of it, the way it's been managed, the ideas, his inability sometimes, it appears, to articulate his ideas clearly. That has concerned a lot of people. And I can see as this thing grinds on down into the fall that any flaws in the campaign are going to be magnified, and any good points are going to be magnified. And again, it's Barack Obama's to lose, in my opinion, at this point.
Real briefly,
we're out of time.
We're out of time.
That can't be possible. We don't allow. we don't run out of time on this show, do we?
Does it matter who's the vice president and who's it going to be?
Not much, in my opinion.
It can only hurt you. It doesn't get you elected, but it can hurt you.
Okay. Ben Odom, Mike McCarville, we appreciate you coming on the Verdict and discussing
politics. Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Kent and I'll have a final word after this.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're wrapping up a show about politics with Ben Odom and Mike McCarville, our guests.
Yes, and those guys are really fun guests to have on. It's really good that we can get their time to talk about things that are important to all of us. Those races are just upon us now.
People want to read more information about these two or want to send them an email, they can go to their websites, and I'll give you those addresses. Just throw some W's in front of this and you'll get there. Ben Odom's website is okdemocrats.com. That's okdemocrats.com. And Mike McCarville can be reached at tmrcom.blogspot.com. Or you can just do a Google search under Mike McCarville and that web address will come up, tmrcom.blogspot.com. Just a few seconds left.
Yeah, exciting time in Oklahoma for a lot of reasons. The NBA team, the elections, the economy, everything's going on. We're going to try on this show, Mick, to bring to our viewers something about each of those things. Right. Hope to have somebody from the NBA, Oklahoma City team, whatever it is, on in the future.
2008 is a very interesting year in politics, and we'll be watching it closely and try to have Mike McCarville and Ben Odom back on a future show. That's going to do it for now. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time right here on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.